Okay, hopefully Brian makes it back. When he does, we'll let him in. So, sorry for the technical difficulties, but I think we're mostly here. Hopefully Ryan pops back in online. We'll get started here in just a minute. We'll do some quick introductions. Actually, maybe we'll just start with introductions. I'm going to start by saying thanks everybody for coming. Carl McLean, I am the planning official here. I think I know everybody in the room and online. Some of you I've known for a long time, others I've known not so long. And we haven't committed. The city boardman started a little over a year ago, made the decision to right, wrong, smart, stupid, I don't know what. We made the decision to update all of our planning documents. So an economic opportunities analysis, as these two gentlemen will explain much better and much more fully as part of this conversation today, is a needed input into a comprehensive plan update, potentially, and certainly a needed input if you're going to do an urban growth boundary expansion. And its focus is on employment lands, and they'll explain it better than I just did. But I want to thank all of you that are on the Public Advisory Committee for your willingness to participate and support this project. It's been kind of a slow start. It's kind of one of the first things we started on, and it's kind of the last thing that we're really getting kicked off on. But we took a bit of a hiatus, and we did a great strategic planning process with the city council. Much thanks to Matt and his group for that work. The city council did adopt that earlier this month. Earlier this month. And it's now up on the city's website. And we've linked some information about the strategic planning process to the city council page, as well as our adopted plans and codes page. So we're excited about the focus that it's going to provide. And so anyway, here we are, we're with the EOA. I'm glad Ryan has hopped back on. So as far as introductions go, I think we'll go around the table here and then we'll capture the folks online. And for those of you online, we can't get our camera to work on this end. So we are recording, the PowerPoint will be up. So at least the recording will capture the audio and it'll capture the PowerPoint. So maybe when we stop the PowerPoint, you all can just keep talking and we'll get your pictures up. So hopefully we'll record that. Thank you. I'm gonna go this way so that our consultant team can introduce themselves first, and then we'll capture everybody else in the room.
All right. My name is Matt Hasty. I'm with a consulting firm called MIG. I previously worked for a consulting firm called Angelo Planning Group, and kind of between those two firms, I've been doing work in this county and Eastern Oregon, across the state for a long time, for 30 years, close to it. I always hate to say that, but it's actually true. And so happy to be a part of this project. I did help with the strategic planning effort, and for the economic opportunities analysis, Brandon will talk about that. Kind of our role, my firm's role is sort of the land supply side of things, and then also kind of the policy side to a degree, and kind of connection from the economic opportunities analysis to the city's comprehensive plan, which is its broader policy document. So that's kind of where I come into things. Whenever I say we about my firm, I really mean all the people I work with back in my office. They're the ones doing the work, but I'm here talking to you today and overseeing work. So yeah, so that's me. That's probably more than you needed.
I'm Brendan Buckley with the firm called Johnson Economics. As Matt said, we've been partnering on this type of study for a long time now. We do some of the technical analysis to come up with the land need projections, really job growth projections and things like that feed into the demand, and we'll talk more about that. But I also worked out in this area in the Columbia Basin for a long time. Worked with the city of Boardman on a couple projects, including urban renewal, and have done a housing study for the county. We've worked for the port and other communities out here. So we love to be able to work out here and have reason to be out here. It's one of my favorite parts of the state. So anyway, we're really looking forward to this. Thank you all for being here, and we'll just be telling you more about it as we go. Okay.
Mike, you want to start?
Yeah, Mike Hughes, I'm the fire chief here in Boardman, and I'm also representing the Boardman Chamber.
Thank you.
Brenda Crawford. I run a little childcare here and so I serve on the city council and the library district.
Jennifer Layton, and I am part of the planning commission,
And runs a great little burger place here in town.
and I do own a restaurant here in town. Yes.
Cool. Joe Young, I've got Harvest Town Foods, the grocery store right across here.
Hi everyone, my name is Rodrigo Santias and I'm part of Amazon's real estate team. I'm excited to meet everyone.
And then online, Mark, we'll start with you and then go to Dawn and then Ryan.
Okay, Mark Patton, Portomoro, Chief Operations Officer. I think I know most everybody on this call.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dawn Hurt. I'm the Eastern Oregon Regional Rep for DLCD, which is the Department of Land Conservation and Development. I cover the 10 most eastern counties in Eastern Oregon, as well as 59 cities. And you got a great consulting team here. I've worked with Matt and Brendan on projects not only in Eastern Oregon, but in my former position in the Dalles. So glad to have them here.
My name is, excuse me, my name is Ryan DeGroft. I'm a Regional Development Officer for Business Oregon. That's the state's economic development agency. I cover 4 counties out here in Eastern Oregon. I've been doing economic development for about 13 years in the region and have a little bit of planning experience too, having served on my local planning commission for about 10 years. So happy to contribute any way I can.
Thank you. So with that, I'll just turn it over to you guys to run the show.
That sounds great. Would you like me to take the mouse for the presentation? Is that the
Sure, you
easiest thing?
or Matt, or however you want to do that. Pass the mouse around. I guess you do have on this here, you say city staff are supposed to talk about the impetus, the objectives and outcomes.
Well, we'll get there
Okay,
in just a sec.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, so that's on the next slide.
okay, I'll let you,
I'll prompt you.
I'll jump in when you ask me to.
All
Yes.
So our agenda today is to talk about the project. Thanks again for being here. This is an advisory committee for the economic opportunities analysis. And it's very important to have a group like this together so that our analysis is based on real world knowledge and what's actually happening out here. And we're not just, doing it from our desks. So you have a very important role here and we appreciate you taking the time. What we want to do today is talk about what this project is, talk a little bit about how we do the economic opportunities analysis, or EOA, and how we do the land inventory side, and then get into discussion with this group about economic development and your thoughts on the local economy and goals for the community. So really getting to the discussion is an important part, but we do need to do a little bit of background on just to familiarize everyone with what we're doing here. So this project is a little different because, oftentimes we're doing this type of study for a city and it's kind of one of the few things they have going on. In Boardman, there's a lot going on. So we were going to have Carla talk a little bit, and she mentioned this a minute ago, but maybe talk a little bit more about all the pieces that are moving along simultaneously that this is a part of.
I will say, we've got a slide on the strategic plan, so you can talk about that too, but I'll cover
But
that.
you, okay, I'll hit it very high level. So, we had a change in leadership, as all of you know, almost 2 years ago now. Come summer, Brandon will have been here 2 years. And there had been talk for quite some time that the city's planning documents were incredibly outdated. I mean, our TSP is 2001. That's about the same era as our current development code. Our comp plan is 2001, 2003. There was a housing needs analysis that was done as a countywide project back in 2019, but the city really never did anything with that input or data. And so we started the year prior to that, we had applied for a TGM grant for a transportation system plan. We were highly encouraged to apply a second time. We did, we were successful. So when Brandon came on board, there was conversations with the park districts. Their park plan had expired. And it was no longer in date. They needed to do one. So we're like, well, we kind of need one too, because we don't know what we're doing with our city parks. So we agreed to collaborate and work on a parks master plan. And again, the code is so out of date and so frustrating. And then the housing needs analysis, I would like to say it's currently underway, but the state is going through some significant kind of lots of statute has changed. They're going through a lot of rulemaking. And what we really need from a rulemaking perspective isn't available to us yet to be able to engage on the housing needs analysis. Not that the buildable lands inventory that is being done now will not feed the housing needs analysis. So we just knew we needed to do all this work. As we started that work and really got into it, the city council, I think rightly said, well, why are we doing this? And what is the objective? And what are we trying? What are the questions that we're trying to answer? So we kind of hit pause, particularly on the EOA, and engaged again with the group we had hired to do our economic opportunities analysis. Said, hey, can we insert a little strategic planning process in this? And we did, and we came in and started a process where we asked some really good questions, and I think in the end got some really good answers. So that's kind of where we're at. What I will say is this summer, we will come to conclusion with the Parks Master Plan, and then shortly thereafter, the Economic Opportunities Analysis. By Christmas, we will have the Transportation System Plan adopted. And then the comp plan and development code update should be done by spring-ish of 26. It's targeted for April. It's just gonna slip. I know it's gonna slip. It'll be May or June. But by summer of 2026, all of this work should be done. Except for the housing needs analysis. As soon as the rules are done, we're ready to move forward with that particular project as well. And then we're going to have some internal conversation about an update to our Main Street interchange area management plan. But we don't want to engage that until the TSP is done, because we want the inputs from the TSP to further inform and update to that planning document. So that's kind of where we're at. We're kind of in the middle of all of this. We've got 4 active public advisory committees. So there's this group, there's one for the TSP, there's one for the Parks Master Plan, and there's one for the comp plan and development code. And I don't know what else I could say, but I'm happy at any point in time to answer questions about any or all of these. So we do have a great page on our website. If you go to the website and take the bar across the top and go to the community one and click on the strategic plan, I see Ryan moving there. He's gonna go look at it right now. You can see all of these projects. We are trying to record the PAC meetings, put all the information there. So if you have a question about any of them, you can start there, but don't hesitate to reach out and ask either myself or Brandon questions about what we're doing. I'm gonna hand it back to you guys. Thank you.
Okay, so a lot going on, and this is one piece of it. We did want to touch on the strategic planning that has just wrapped up, because these are obviously some of the ideas that are going to feed into what we're doing here.
Yeah, and I'll just say a little bit about this and build on what you all heard from Carla a moment ago. So as Carla said, wanted to just kind of talk to folks in the community about what do you want to see in this community in the future? What do you think is important? So we did really kind of some survey work, both on the ground, but also via an online survey. But a lot of the promotion of it, like getting people to take it, was just kind of on the ground with folks. We did that with community members, including kids. We had a component that was with the high school, and we had the high schoolers participated in like their separate online survey, and it was similar questions to what we asked, say, adults, but in some different ways to try to make it just sort of more accessible to them. And then we also, when I say we, is really the school district, did some in-class activities with elementary school kids too. And so the questions we asked were, what do you like about Boardman? Why do you live here? What makes this a special place for you? What is missing? What do you wish was here? What do you want to see here in the future? And also we asked some specific questions about housing. You know, what types of housing do you think are needed? What are your challenges in terms of obtaining the kind of housing you need? So pretty, you know, high level questions we asked folks. And then ultimately identified kind of these five overarching goals that you see up on the screen here, based on what we heard from folks. And we had, I think, I can't remember all the numbers, but I'm gonna say about 300 participants total. The combination of activities we did, about adults and half kids in high school, indoor, elementary school. So I felt like that was great, especially kind of that youth participation. You don't always get that in these kind of processes. It's just always good, just like hear what kids have to say. You know, I mean, they are really the future of this community long term, hopefully, right? So that was great. So we came up with these five overarching goals, and there's some additional information in the strategic planning document about what we mean when we talk about these things. But it's still pretty brief. It's like a 5-page document. So we weren't trying to get like super detailed or down in the weeds on any of these given topics, but just set sort of a foundational set of goals that will help guide these other projects that we've been talking about. And we'll talk more about the employment or economic opportunities analysis today, but they're meant to be kind of an overarching framework for all of those planning processes. But each of those planning processes will get down into a lot more detail on each of these things. So that's what I'll say about that strategic planning effort. So, and as Carla said, it's on the website. And we also developed sort of some like branding materials. So that logo you see up in kind of that's the logo for the city, but we sort of pulled that into a logo for the strategic plan. So when people are looking at this stuff, they kind of see, or hopefully see visually, it's kind of all tied together, all part of a larger process. So we did a little bit of that as well. So I will stop. Just any questions about that? Have people seen that? Did anybody participate in the surveys we did? Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. No, it's okay if you didn't.
Were you able to compile all the data from that? Is that what?
Yeah, yeah, and we have like, I don't know how many pages, because the questions we asked people were all open-ended. So, which has always been a challenge in terms of compiling data. So we did two things. One, we did sort of a summary report that says, here were sort of the overarching themes, and that's really where these goals came from, or the overarching themes we heard from the responses. So we described, here are the things that people repeatedly told us. Here's who participated in the survey, because we asked some demographic questions. And then we've also got all the responses from all the kids, younger kids, the high schoolers, the folks who participated. So we do have that. I don't know if that complete like 50-page or whatever it is document is on the city's website.
We didn't post it with all the
Yeah,
responses.
but if folks want to like see that, let us know. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I always like to read the kids' responses, frankly. I'm always, it's fun. But yeah, so we did. Yeah, we definitely on the website is the overarching sort of summary of what we heard, and that's not a super long document. That's maybe 6 pages, something fairly digestible. Are there any other questions on this one? Awesome.
So the strategic planning process was sort of a good first step. It's broader than just looking at the economic side of things, but each of these kind of does tie into what we will be doing with this study. Certainly anything having to do with shopping and services, but also the issue of housing is very closely tied to the workforce, and having workforce or having enough housing and the proper types of housing available in the community for the types of jobs you'd like to create. And then, of course, livability and public services and so on are also tied to the business environment. So all these things come together in what we're doing. So let's get to that. The economic opportunities analysis. I know it's a strange term that we keep using. But it does come from somewhere. It comes from the state planning rules. And what it is the type of study that's required for a community to look at the land that it has available for employment. And when we say that, we mean basically land that's zoned for commercial use, generally retail or office, or industrial use. So really what study is meant to do is to look at the land that's remaining in the community, compare it to our analysis of what might be needed over a 20-year period, and really come to a conclusion on if the community has enough employment land and the right types of employment land in terms of site sizes and some other parameters. So the way that we go about this is we start by identifying the community's economic development goals. This is what we like to talk with you folks about quite a bit during this process, and target industries that come out of those goals. So trying to identify specific sectors or business types that you might want to attract or that you currently have and you'd like to see more growth over the next 20 years. Then we do look at economic trends and job growth forecasting. So that's some of the more numbers-based stuff that we do to provide background. And then there'll be the land inventory of what your current employment land looks like, how much of it is left and considered buildable. And then what we compare the two and we say, what does that mean? What kind of new policies or actions might be sort of suggested coming out of our findings? And then finally, that leads to an update of the comprehensive plan for the economic chapter. All the other studies we've talked about are about updating other parts of the comprehensive plan. This one is about updating that specific economic chapter. So the role for this group, we hope, is over the course of the project to be able to meet 3 or 4 times to talk about the analysis as it happens, and we'll have interim products and finding and data to talk to you guys about as the meetings go forward. And then, of course, to advise us on the local picture and local goals, as we've talked about, and just provide your feedback. And then another important role for this group is to inform other people in the communities or back at the organizations you represent of what we're doing. If you think they might be interested and have some thoughts of their own or would like to have some say. So kind of be ambassadors a little bit to what we're doing to the folks that you know in the community who might also be interested.
Before you leave that,
Mhm.
that inform others. One of the things that Brandon and I are working hard to do with each of these public advisory committees is making sure that we're keeping our city council informed of what's going on. So let's see, it's the end of March. I might ask what I just need one of you, and not because Brandon couldn't, but because I'd like to mix it up a little bit and not have a city council provide a report to the city council. Me too. Would one of you have some time the evening of April 1st to come and just provide a short update or summary about what happens here today to the city council? And I don't need the answer, but I will be following up with one or more of you to find out if one of you is available to do that. So what's your calendar for Tuesday evening, April 1st? And if you have a little free time, if you wouldn't mind coming to city council and sharing about this, it would be much appreciated. Brandon and I both would appreciate that. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, that would be great. And we can talk about that more after the meeting. Before we get started and sort of launch into the, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to come back to this. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about how the format of the EOA plays out. So really, there's 2 big pieces. One is the economic and trends analysis, and then the forecasts of demand that's based on job growth. And it's based on that's translated into an estimate of the need for land itself. So that's the part that my firm tends to work on the most with input from MIG. And then there's the buildable lands inventory of the current land you have in the proper zones. And that's what MIG focuses on in this first part. That all comes together really into the report, which is called the Economic Opportunity, the EOA report. And coming out of that, then we have recommendations for specific changes to the comprehensive plan and the development code that are sort of the end of the process. And that's again, one of MIG's focuses. So that's the basic flow of the project. We get to eventually bringing this to public hearings and adoption after we've gone through some reviews with this group and with the council. So this is the schedule that we're looking at. We are getting things started. Because of how this project has gone and inserting the strategic planning piece beforehand, we've had quite a bit of time. So we actually have been working on some of the analysis and technical pieces already. We're not going to talk about those today, but those will be ready to show you folks really pretty soon, the first drafts. So what it looks like is, we'll be working on those. We'll come back to this group maybe even in the first part of May, so just a little over a month, to talk about the technical findings, and then through that process, trying to finalize that, and then move on to the strategies, and probably planning some sort of work session or something with a combination of the planning commission and city council in the middle there, and then at the end coming back for the adoption process. So how is this done? So an important question is sort of how do we come up with our estimate or forecast of how much land the community is going to need for its 20 years of future job growth. So basically we start with the current employment profile, and we can get that data from the state, and it's pretty highly accurate to the firms and employment levels that are already in the community. We keep that anonymous and provide a summarized version so that people can't tell which specific businesses and which industries, that's confidential information. But so we have that profile of employment broken down by sector, and we then project that forward. And there's a couple ways to do that. The state provides what are called safe harbor approaches, and they say you can use these two factors if you want as your growth rate going forward, and those are kind of accepted factors, or it's just sort of the safe harbor approach in the sense that the state accepts that methodology. So the two ways we can do that is to use a forecast that comes from the Oregon Employment Department. That they do that on a regional basis around the state, and so they do that a forecast for Morrow County and Umatilla County together by by industry sector, saying this is how much we think each of these sectors is looking to grow over the next 10 years. We just bump that forward to 20 years. But so for this region, that growth rate overall is at growth rate of 0.7% per year. Or we can use the population growth forecast that is done by the Portland State Population Research Center for every community in the state. And they have an official forecast that they do they basically move around the state, updating it every 4 years. So they were, the forecast in Morrow dates to
2 years ago.
Was it 2 years ago? Basically 2023. Okay. So so we have a forecast from them. It's a couple years old, and they won't be redoing it for a couple years. But that forecast is a little bit faster. That's for Boardman specifically, not for the broader region. And so for Boardman, their forecast is a slightly faster growth rate. So when we apply that to employment, that would show a little bit greater job growth over the 20-year period. What we typically end up doing is an adjusted growth forecast. So this is also an accepted part of the process. It just takes a little more grounding and explanation of why we're making the adjustments that we're making. But typically what we do is we start with one of the safe harbor forecasts, and then we look at what are the community's goals and what are the target industries, and do we need to sort of tweak little levers in different industry sectors to show that what the Boardman community would like and what you've expressed your intent to do is to seek more growth in certain industries. And we can make that reflected in the forecast and kind of turn up the knobs for those different sectors. And that will get us to an adjusted job growth forecast. So the next time we talk, I will have numbers for each of these and we can talk about what makes the most sense to you. And so taking that employment forecast, we go through the process of sort of translating that into first need for new real estate and to house all those employees going forward. And we break that down by the type of real estate, office, industrial, or retail, so on, that those types of job sectors tend to use. And then we say, okay, we know that we might need this much physical space. How much land does that require? And that's the basic process to get to a 20-year forecast of land need. And then that gets us into comparing it to the supply. And I'll ask Matt to talk about their process of doing that.
Yep. So we kind of start out with all the land in the city, and then we kind of go through a series of subtracting different types of land to get down to what's the net billable acres of land. So first of all, we kind of start with everything, and then we take out the residential, the land that's zoned for residential use. And then we look at land that's already been developed or is proposed or planned to be developed for public uses. So, if there's a piece of property that, oh, this is owned by the city and it's already planned to be a new fire station or something like that, those come off the table. And then we further look at land that might be constrained by natural resources or natural hazard conditions. So, in some places that includes, with more topography, that might include steep slopes or hillsides. Not as much of that here, but wetlands, floodplains, you do have some of those areas here. Or just, riparian areas, streams, etc. So, and we take sort of that resource itself and whatever kind of buffer the city requires around those areas. So that gets pulled out. In some cases, those areas previously, maybe in the future, can actually be developed to some degree, like floodplains. But floodplain regulations, as folks know, are getting more strict in terms of what you can or can't develop within a floodplain area. So historically, we've been a little conservative and just kind of, again, from a land supply side, taking that off the table. We do look at, what the city does and doesn't allow in terms of employment uses within those types of areas to be as sort of precise as we can be, but that comes off the table. So that kind of gets us now down to unconstrained and kind of uncommitted land. And when I say committed, really committed for public uses. And then we take some more kind of off the top that we assume is going to be needed for roads and other infrastructure. So that's typically a percentage, and for employment land, that's going to be usually on the order of like 10 to 15%. It's usually more for residential land, but it's a little less for employment land. So that then gets us down to net buildable acres. So that's sort of the supply of land you have and we're looking at this for not just the city limits, but the urban growth boundary. So within the urban growth boundary, how many net buildable acres of land is there that can accommodate the types of employment uses that Brendan's firm is identifying? There are some things that we we can't use to deduct off of the supply or reduce the supply, because again, this is expected to be net buildable acres over this 20-year period. So this can be problematic in certain places, but I'm going to talk about it. We'll probably end up talking about it some more. But for instance, property owner willingness, if you've got somebody who says, well, yeah, sure, I own this land, but I don't plan on developing this in the future. Just that person saying that, the state does not allow the city to say, well, you know, we're just going to take that out of the inventory. Now, if there is some kind of legal agreement that prevents the development of that property for some period of time out, you know, through the planning horizon, or some other documentation, that can be a way to take that off the table. If there is land that doesn't have necessarily a structure on it yet, but the owner has taken other actions to commit it to development. Can't be just like I submitted a land use application. It has to be, I have started to build infrastructure on this property. It will be developed within X number of years. That can be a reason to deduct land or consider that land essentially committed or developed. There are some other kind of nuanced conditions that we can use to deduct land from the inventory. And I'm not saying this to say, oh, we just want to deduct all the land. We can't. It's more, we want to be realistic about what the supply looks like and what really is buildable. So there are some other things related to, like, let's say power line easements. If the easement says you cannot develop something within this power line easement, then that is not buildable, you know. But if it says, well, you can store stuff out there, well, then it's maybe like partially buildable. So there's some things like that. Federal lands can be deducted. So there's a number of other things. But then there are, again, and it can't be just, well, this property doesn't have water or sewer services right up to the property yet. Well, if the city's planning on serving that area within the next 20 years, then we need to consider that as part of the supply. So again, there are some things we use to get down to that net buildable acres, and some things we don't use or can't use per per state rules. And that's kind of a conversation we often end up having with the state.
I have a question about the urban growth boundary.
Mhm.
So in 20 years, the urban growth boundary could move further away from the current lines. Is that something that's considered?
Yeah, so that's sort of like more of an outcome or output of this process. So that's partly why we're doing this, right? We're looking at, okay, based on the forecasts we have now for future job growth, and then separately for future housing growth, and based on comparing that to the amount of land within the existing urban growth boundary that's considered buildable. If there's a deficit, if we find as part of this process and other processes that you don't have enough land for either the long-term growth or specific types of uses that you are trying to develop or want to be developed, and you can sort of make the case for, this is a legitimate thing for us to seek, then that's where that comes in. If you've got the deficit, or you can make the case that you need new land, and you don't have enough of it within your urban growth boundary, this is some of the information that's used to make that case for a future urban growth boundary expansion. So we don't start out usually within the EOA or within a housing needs analysis looking at properties outside the urban growth boundary, but that is sort of an outcome or a follow-up step often of these processes. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's kind of the land supply piece. Again, it's one of sort of the two initial components that go into then that comparison of supply and demand. So other questions? Generally makes sense. Right.
Okay. I put the map in here just to maybe make things a little more concrete and talk about some of the areas that we're talking about here. So the your employment zones are the sort of the purple, light purple and darker purple zones that are mostly you see up in the north east part and also the central part of the city. The pink right in the middle is a commercial zone. And the yellow areas are residential. And you have some areas that are marked as future urban. And remind me, are those?
The way the development code is written, they're assumed to be residential,
Okay.
assumed to be, so, yeah.
So, this is, your zones and your areas are probably, anyone who's familiar with Boardman are probably in the areas that you would think of. And you also have the interesting, wrinkle of having your industrial area bump into the ports industrial areas up there, to the northeast. But, so what the process that Matt's been talking about is what we're going to apply to all the properly zoned lands, and we won't be looking at the residential lands.
But I will note that in preparation for that housing needs analysis, we are doing a buildable lands inventory. It's separate from the EOA process, but we are working on a buildable lands inventory for residential land as well. So it's sort of like when we look at these maps and like at our next meeting, and you'll see us focus on employment lands, and we'll kind of gray out the non-employment lands. There's another activity going on to look at the residential lands, non-employment lands. So, but it won't be the focus of this process, but it is work we're doing.
Right, and I would add that it's important to look at, if you're gonna look at buildable lands, and if you're gonna do the inventory, it makes sense to look at both of them, because we do allow mixed use.
Right.
And where that commercial and residential intersects with mixed use, you have to account for that in some way. That's technical, they'll do that.
And it's also just useful to kind of do them at the same time, so you have kind of this complete picture of what the land supply looks like. And if you are, if you're thinking in the future about pursuing an urban growth boundary, you typically, depending on kind of what the rationale for the urban growth boundary amendment is, you need to think first about, well, okay, maybe we've got more housing, residential land than we need, but not enough employment land. You need to think about, well, are there some changes we could make to rezone one this to the other? So, and again, that's why I think it's helpful to kind of be looking at them at the same time. Sorry.
Oh, that's great. And the other thing I'd point out here is the red dotted line is your city limits, and the dark blue line is the urban growth boundary. So you see there are still some areas that are within your urban growth boundary, but not yet in your city limits. But most of those are planned for future residential rather than commercial use. So with that, I wanted to keep moving here so that we can get to more discussion, but were there any questions on the sort of the technical methodology that we've been talking about for either the projections or the inventory at this point?
So when you drew this in, I'm gonna go back to one of the hurdles that you had identified earlier was willingness of the property owner to do some of this. I know a few of these folks, and so that's why I was just wanting to know. I mean, you have some really interesting colors on there, but I know that a few of these folks, they produce their own green color through these.
Hey, Carla, I don't know if you can hear us, but we lost audio on our end.
So, yeah, again, we're not really allowed to say, well, this person
I need
right
to
now
share.
doesn't want to.
I need to.
Expect. But we do sort of think about it from sort of a strategic level. Well, if this person doesn't want to develop this for this, or says, maybe there needs to be a conversation about the designation and the plans for that land, and think about redesignating if that's an option, and if it's consistent with city goals, and the community's desires for what gets developed where. Beyond that, it's kind of a tough one to deal with explicitly, but we do want to kind of understand where people are at in terms of the future use of their land and their plans for developing it. So we do tend to have conversations with folks, and I know that the city has conversations with folks.
Sure.
So it's a kind of not a great answer, but a little bit of it.
Well, I just know that their livelihood is driven based on that, and they invested in our community
Yeah.
to access those grounds and supported that from the beginning to now.
Yeah.
And so, when I look at that, I go, okay, well, that's great. However, how do we take them into regard for that investment that they put into our community?
So there's a couple of really large tracts and it equates to 2 landowners.
Mhm.
So the farming is all Dan McCarty.
Mhm.
And he's not interested in not farming. He's a farmer.
As a farmer,
And I think that at some point in time, we're gonna have to have that serious conversation about, hey, Dan, we really need you to think about Boardman. We need more residential land.
Is that one kind of in the?
So Dan is
Talking about the yellow spaces below the red line, all the
the,
blue.
well, and then
Does the city own the blue?
nope,
no,
it's the one little corner in the south.
Very top.
there, the city owns that piece.
Yeah.
But the blue and the yellow,
Up here too.
yeah, that's one big circle, and then there's a half circle. Then the yellow, the brighter yellow outside the red line, just to the west of that, there's two small circles. And once Tuscany and River Ridge have completed their build out, we have one other subdivision that will be going through its infrastructure installation, and that's the Chaparral Phase 2, which is between the two developed subdivisions up below the freeway, but between two. That'll provide 65 more residential lots. And I know we're talking about employment lands today, but on the residential side, we've got basically the last of River Ridge, the final phase of River Ridge, a few lots at Tuscany, and then we'll have Chaparral too. And when those are built, that's the end of, other than some infill that can happen, that's kind of the end of our residential land. We've got to have that conversation with Mr. McCarty at some point in time. It's probably gonna take somebody being willing to offer him enough money for him to say, great, I can get out of farming and on this circle or that circle, or somebody providing him the ability to swap land.
Yeah,
So-
that's the other thing I would say is there,
1031 exchange type deal, I mean.
yeah, there is the ability to go through an urban growth boundary land exchange, process where you take some out and put some in. There are a lot of rules related to that as well. And in going through that process, you still need to sort of look at how you prioritize land for inclusion in an urban growth boundary. So there's a lot of sort of things that go along with that, but that is another way to sort of think about that potentially. And because if you've got somebody that says, hey, not just in the next 10 years, but in the next 50 years, I do not plan to develop this for urban uses. Well, then that land probably shouldn't be in your urban growth boundary. The point of land in the urban growth boundary is that it is specifically urbanized, developed for urban uses over the next 20 years. And if somebody's plans are for the really long term not to do that, well, then think about pulling it out so that the city can pull other land in where people are interested and willing to do that and meet those needs. So I'm not saying that's what ought to be done here. I'm just saying that is another way to think about that.
On the commercial side, the
The
big
pink line is at Olson or the blue line is at Miller on the east side?
blue line at Miller.
The blue
Oh,
line.
Olson, that's Olson.
That's Olson. So the
Yep.
city doesn't go all the way to Miller.
Not there, no,
Okay.
But we can talk about, we'll get into the whys here in a minute, and we'll talk
Yeah, the
about,
purple is all Mons.
not all of the light, not
Pink.
the pink, not all of the pink is Mons. Because some of the pink is on this side of city, is on this side of Maine. City Hall is in the pink. But all of the pink. Yep, City Hall's up on the north end of that, right about there is where City Hall is.
And so is your store.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All in the pink because it's commercial.
And if what I'm understanding has happened, the Mons don't own that anymore.
Yeah, I think they've sold it.
So with that land sale, I think that we will see development happen on that 64 acres sooner rather than later. So lots have been happening. And the city is somewhat responsible for sitting on land too long as well. The city owns a number of parcels along Front Street. But the city council has finally decided to move forward and sell some of that land. And I think that's a step in the right direction.
Some of it's already sold.
Yeah. So, the old city shop, again, I don't know the status of where all of this is at, but the old city shop and 1 or 2 parcels along Front Street are moving. And, there's a lot of activity happening. And, there's other good stuff that's happening, and there's conversations happening about the library needing to expand, and maybe, can they expand in their current location, or they need to look for a new location? I mean, so there's a lot happening, because if the library moved, that would create another opportunity for a business, whether in the current building, which I understand isn't the greatest, or redevelopment of that piece of land. So there's just so many things that are happening that I think are really, really positive. We'll stop there. Hand it back to you, Brendan.
Okay. No, this is all good stuff. And so the outcome of this process will be a finding of how much land you need for employment. Unfortunately, the housing study is delayed, but coming out of both of those, you'll have findings on how much land and what type of land you really need. And then you start to have the conversations about what to do with the urban growth boundary.
Yeah. I will make one last comment. This is related to the housing one. I do know that the 2019 countywide study and the findings for Boardman, the projected need in that housing needs analysis for Boardman for multifamily housing, we've not only met that in the last 6 years, we have exceeded it significantly.
Right.
So,
Still without housing.
and we're still without housing. So, we know we need houses.
Yeah.
Well, and it's affordable houses. We need to look at our demographics.
Yes.
People cannot afford Tuscany houses.
Right.
And there needs to be smaller houses that people can afford.
Yep. Absolutely.
Definitely some of what we want to talk about along the way. Those types of intersection with the jobs that you'd like, but also with your actual residents and the needs of the folks here. So I'm going to keep moving just with an eye on the clock. I'm going to talk quickly about target industries. So I mentioned that we go about adjusting the forecasted growth rate and coming up with a list of target industries that the community is interested in as a big part of that. This is, there's a lot on this slide, but basically what it's getting at is we have a few metrics that we are going to look at and present to you about what industries have sort of traditionally been the strongest here or the strongest now, but then also what you might like to see going forward. And they're not always the same thing. Sometimes there's some transition going on. So that's what we'll be looking at in order to make those adjustments and come up with a list of target industries.
Could you go back to that gaining share and explain what that is about?
Yes, gain share is about the how fast it's growing. So there's a couple different measures. One is location quotient. We really need to come up with better terms for all these. They're way more wonkish than they need to be. But so one is looking at, okay, what do you have, what type of employment or job sectors is strongly represented now? And then gain share is about, okay, what has been growing the fastest, which isn't necessarily what's largest yet, but it's just what's been growing fastest and what has the most positive trend. So that's really what that's about. We'll be able to give you answers on those types of things. Momentum, as it says. And then the other things we look at is what the state is forecasting for the region, as we talked about. And then we'll get into, start to get into just the anecdotal knowledge of what you guys know, what has been growing fast out here. We'll get into discussion of information technology sector and data centers. We'll certainly be touching on that. So that's those are all the things that we'll be getting into four target industries, but I wanted to really hopefully move on with discussion while we have you guys here. So, what I'd like to get some feedback on and maybe get the group thinking about is thinking about all this process. We don't want to just get lost in the weeds of thinking about acreage of land. We really want to talk about the economic development goals of the community and the big picture. So I'm hoping we can get some discussion going on these types of questions. So what are the top economic development goals that you see for the community? What businesses and services are needed? What types of industries do you think have potential or are the most important here? One thing that isn't on here is the greatest challenges that you see right now to job growth and to providing the types of employment that are maybe needed here either for current residents or do you see going forward? So those are obviously a lot of big open-ended questions, but I'm wondering if someone would be volunteer to jump in there and maybe start giving some of their thoughts on the economic development picture in the community.
Getting more women into the workforce requires more childcare.
Okay.
See, and it was a #1 rated concern nationwide. Childcare.
Is there
Well, I
any
think,
sort of, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
real quick, are there any sort of childcare solutions in the community now, or is it just kind of a?
Yeah, we have the Neil Early Learning Center. We
Okay.
have 4 Head Start programs, 2 infant and 2 preschool. And then we have 1 special needs kind of class, preschool only, and 1 migrant class, preschool only. And then we have 4 community-based classrooms, 2 infant, an infant toddler kind of, and then preschool. There's a couple of other institutions around town. I call them institutions because they've been in business for more than 3 or 4 years. So that offer in-home or short day preschool systems. But it's on average, I was a school teacher here for 20 years. On average, there were about 100 kids every year in kindergarten. And so when you tease that out in groups of 20, there's 20 in my program, 40 in Head Start, and 40 in the 2 ESD run classes. And that is a combination of 3 and 4-year-olds. So you're missing about 100 kids. You have 100 kids out there that are being seen in another way. They're being cared for in another way. And the 1 or 2 in-home places are not serving more than 8 kids. So you can extrapolate that you have about 84 kids sit down without childcare in the 3 and 4. And in the infant 0 to 3, you can assume there's about 300 kids and you have about, well, I have 16, Head Start has 16, I have 18, they have 16. Maybe in the homes they have 1 or 2. So you have 300 minus 30. So you have 270 kids out there.
Right, might have to follow up with you for some of those numbers.
That's just a layperson's
Yeah.
opinion.
Much more need than capacity is what it sounds like.
And I know DLCD has done some great work around barriers to some of the childcare issues. And I know when we responded as a community to that survey that they did, I was amazed at how out of sync our development code is with even current regulations, let alone encouraging in any way, shape, or form that childcare component of the economy. So
And there's Dilk has some stuff on the state legislature right now for rezoning and all of that for childcares, get childcares in housing communities.
Yeah.
So you're doing development,
Right.
make a buildable spot for childcare.
There have already been some changes in this city need to allow those types of uses.
Yep,
kind of
absolutely.
throughout the city.
Yep.
And I understand too that the state is gonna be working on a model code for childcare to be a resource for communities to help update their zoning regulations as well.
Yes. But one of the big pieces for childcare is they have to be free from other kinds of businesses. You can't have childcare where you might have a marijuana dispensary. Now, we don't have anything like that here, but it's a consideration in this.
But I think that plays into I mean, what she's saying is, first off, you don't have the facilities, then you don't have the people that willing to do it, and then you don't have the housing. So at any time in Boardman, you have between 200 and 400 jobs available every day. And, the people that are working don't live in this area, because the housing doesn't match. So they make a good wage and they go to Hermiston or Tri-Cities to live because they get bigger, better, more. So none of it works. It just doesn't, you know. The people that are buying houses here are, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, executives in larger industries. And they're driving up those, I mean, they'll buy something without even thinking twice about it, where, you know, we can't hire, or our firefighters and police officers can't live in town because they can't afford the house. And because we're a small community, we want those people to live in town. So when we do have a large scale event, we can recall them. But, you know, my paramedics live in Portland. Yeah, so, you know, our shifts are set up to.
And in
allow
truth,
that.
our hotels are full of people who live in Portland,
Correct.
who work here.
Yep.
They come and they work here Monday through Friday, and then they dip out
Yep.
for the weekend.
Yeah, our hotel model here is reverse.
Yeah.
Most hotel models, they're full Monday, or the full Sunday night through
Thursday.
Friday
Yeah,
morning.
yeah.
Sure.
And then they're empty on the weekend. And that's been the case for at least the last 16 years. Well, it probably goes back to the first.
Before there were as many hotels, they were all
Right.
full with that very same setting.
I know it was the case in 17, because we did a remodel of our home, and we lived at the River Lodge for 5 weeks. So we moved rooms to be able to stay at the River Lodge through that 5-week remodel.
I think the other thing is there's a lot of construction happening all the time in the 97818. Not all of it's inside the city,
And it's not residential construction,
and it isn't.
it's commercial.
Yes.
Industrial.
Yeah.
They're building concrete for Tillamook to do an expansion. They're building stuff out here for energy, clean energy, and they are driving all the service trucks and they're filling up the hotels as well.
Right.
Or their company purchases a home and then rents it to 4 or 5 of their employees with their stipend for that.
I went to the Panel View RV park last night, to pick up some paperwork for a project I'm working on. They're all permanent. Every RV in the Panel View. I mean, I realize that's in the county adjacent, but the people who work here are probably living at Panel View, or they're living at, you know, one of the other RV parks in the region, as is another.
Driftwood's the same way.
Yeah, Driftwood
It's
is
all and it's permanent.
It's, yeah.
That gives the point, right? So we need all this stuff and all these services and stuff. You build it, but then you're gonna struggle to fill it. And then you don't have the housing to support it. It just doesn't, none of it matches, in my opinion.
Although I will say that when Neil Early Learning Center was built initially, and you might know the numbers better than me, but I think it was about 2012 or 2014, in that range. And they had that filled within the first year. And then they went out and got more legislative dollars, matching fund from the feds and Head Start, and built an expansion and took a 4-room building to a 10-room building and filled it. It was signed off and opened in December, and it was full in January. So if we built it, it would probably fill up.
Right, but then again, where are you gonna house these people? They're going to the Neil Learning Center, that's lower income. Correct.
Well, the Head Start side is for people within that 250% of poverty.
Right.
But there are 4 classrooms that are set aside for general.
Right, but I think you get the point.
So just to make sure I understood, you were saying that at any time, there's a couple hundred jobs
Oh, yeah, you can look at them
available.
right now, this second.
Yeah, between the port and the city
Yeah.
of Boardman,
Yeah.
just any business.
Well, if you
any
look at-
occupation, probably,
if you looked at the Boardman zip code and jobs,
yes.
not just city Boardman, but the Boardman zip code,
That's
because 3 miles always recruiting.
Yeah.
The businesses in the port, whether they're in the city or in the county, are always recruiting, yeah, easily.
Those jobs are evergreen. They have evergreen jobs. They never take them off.
Mhm.
They never take them down. Even if they were to fill them to capacity, they would leave the evergreen up because there's so much. He's fighting for an employee that I would love to have. And one of us is gonna get him, and then they're gonna change their mind and come to work for me. That's.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
Going on with the businesses or services that are needed in Boardman, childcare is clearly needed. We've always got openings in the job market. I mean, we've struggled here in the city even to fill positions. But I think otherwise, where do you get your hair cut?
Oh, I go to Umatilla
Yeah.
because the barber left here.
I do it in the mirror in my bathroom.
So, we need the simplest of things as well.
Right.
We need a barber in town. We need a beautician or 2 or 3 in town. But what would also be nice if, Corey Barnett, what is it? Corey, the law firm in Pendleton. And Dennis, Barnett and Morrow, the tax
A
firm.
DMP.
Yeah, a DMV. Although we've asked and they've said no, but we even offered space and they said no. But, those are the kinds of things.
We could ask again.
Yeah, we could. So there's some state services that would be great that would be here. But again, from the simplest, even working with some of these folks to have a satellite office in Boardman, can you figure out how to do that?
So if we had some kind of a space that could be rented out daily, like we could put this business here, and this business here, and this business here, and they could share a wall.
Yeah,
Something.
Something. But then retail we're just lacking. We don't have retail to speak of.
Or.
You can't buy a pair of shoes, you can't buy a pair of pants, you can't, if you needed a shirt as an emergency, there's no place to go buy one. We do finally have a hardware store.
We've always had a hardware store.
Well,
Yeah, it's,
No, we really have always had a
that's
hardware
true.
store.
It's true. She's
And
right.
it had exactly what you needed for an emergency, right? But
now it's a little more of a hardware
Yeah.
store.
absolutely. I'm not disputing, just
Yeah.
we've always had.
I think what's interesting is for a long time in Boardman, and I can remember sitting in meetings when I worked for the county. And I remember going through the conversation with GEOVC on the annual sets, or every 5 years on the sets. And they didn't do one in 19, so it was 14, and then they just completed one now. And I can remember sitting in 14, having this conversation, and Karen Pettigrew was in the room and a couple other folks, and we can't get a hardware store until we have more houses. But it was kind of the flip of that too. We're not gonna get more houses until we have a hardware store. I mean, that was the vicious
Need
cycle that we were in, and we seem to be moving out of that. And when you come to amenities in Boardman, wow, we've got a great fire department, we've got good emergency services, we've got a great PD. We do have childcare, not enough, but at least we have childcare. The rec center is phenomenal, but gosh, where do I go shopping, or where do I have to pick up and get in my car and I have to drive to Hermiston or the Tri-Cities to do a lot of that stuff. So that on the commercial side, that big pink piece that's hopefully sold, and I'm pretty sure it has, and we're gonna see some development there. That's a real opportunity. Now we just need to make sure it gets developed right, and we actually get some of the folks that we've talked long and hard about. I would love I'm not saying that Macario's isn't a good place to eat, or Burnt Field or the River Lodge. But wouldn't it be nice if we had 1 or 2 other options for sit down eating?
Yes.
Yes, maybe Chinese. I dream of Chinese.
The Thai place is pretty good though. That type of.
It's good. Well,
All right, I'll.
and it's, well, but wouldn't it be an opportunity to convert some of our food trucks into brick and mortar restaurants? I mean,
Absolutely.
how do we move?
And wouldn't it be nice if there was on-demand entertainment? So for example, right now you can get enough entertainment that the rec center and the safe center and this group or that group are the sponsors of, you can get all kinds of that. You know, the band from Pendleton comes and you can go and watch that symphony. But that's not on demand. If I wanted to go bowling, I have to go to Hermiston. If I want to go to a movie, I have to go to Hermiston. If I want to go skating, I have to go to Pendleton. If I want any of those, and maybe there's a wider swath than that, I'm kind of old, so that's what I remember about. But there's that on demand, like just grab your whole family and go bowling. You can't do that here unless you go to Hermiston. And it would be,
Can we get the rec center expansion to put like 4 bowling lanes in?
I don't know, it's a possibility. 4 lanes would be great with big food court in the middle and then theater on the other end. Place one movie every other week. I don't know, something.
Yeah, and a little small video arcade in there too, for us old
Sure,
schoolers,
yeah,
like
so
play
schools
Space
like
Invaders,
to
right?
play that.
Something good for
Big pond.
our teenagers or,
Yeah.
or our young adults. There's nothing for somebody between 14 and 21 for them to do that keeps them in town. They have to go out of town. And
It
so
keeps it
how
legal.
how do we keep our kids out of trouble if we have nothing for them to do?
Well, we spend a lot of money on Xboxes, but I would like to see something that's more external outside
Right.
for them, you know?
Touching grass.
Well,
Touching grass, exactly.
yeah,
The cool thing on that side is that the city is working with the district and we are doing a parks master plan. It's gonna provide us a lot of answers and a lot of opportunity for projects, but the interesting thing is what I'm seeing is that all of this stuff we're doing in the city, it all interacts, it all connects. You
Yeah,
know,
I think we need a trampoline park on the three-legged stool of our bowling and
there we go.
theater. A little wild horse.
Are
right
we
here,
answering your
Boardman.
questions?
Yeah, no, this is all great. This is all
Wild horse right here.
context.
So,
So,
go ahead.
no.
Well, I'm trying to working down your list here. What industries have potential, real or aspirational? I think if you go back and look at the history of Boardman and this region, we are an egg-based economy. We have been for
We need a
150
rodeo
years.
We need a rodeo.
Right. So what industries have potential, real or aspirational? We're seeing a real shift in the egg industry these days. And I feel that really intensely at home. My husband works in the egg industry, so we have those conversations all the time.
So
about
what's the shifting?
The farm economy is really struggling right now, and you could see there could be some pretty significant shifts in, land ownership and, pretty significant shifts in, the companies who serve the egg industry. Some of them are teetering.
Where are they?
Well,
Is there
they're
any-
here,
Well,
they're here and
There's,
there.
there's egg.
I
This
can
is
tell you Lamb Weston is struggling to provide a lot of things. Because I had a lawsuit because of the stuff in their food. And so I've noticed that I can't get some of the things that I normally get, and it takes months to get it because they keep shutting different plants down. Because they can't buy potatoes from a certain place, or they can't buy whatever from a certain place because of the things they're finding within their potatoes and their products.
And then the contracts that Lamb Weston held and don't anymore, that's been a big shift in
Like Chick-fil-A.
McDonald's.
McDonald's, Costco, and somebody else. They lost like 3 major contracts.
So there's a lot of shifts that are happening in that egg industry. And as that happens, what does that mean for our folks who are here to do work on farms? And then the regulation. Farming in Oregon has been a legislature for decades was really hands-off with farming and very protective of farming. And my concern is that could shift. That is shifting.
It seems like it's shifting.
At the federal level, that may get better, but at the state level, it's not.
As an employer, every day I turn around and the state makes it harder and harder to hire.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the tariffs are not helping.
There's a hurdle that the state throws up in my path.
Yep. So I think that what industries have potential, I mean, AWS has come into the region. And then what we've seen just in the last little bit you can't read anything online these days without conversation around AI. And if you dig deep enough, you know that AI is gonna push the data center network tenfold what it is right now.
Well, thank God for AI. It's like a second employee. Or
Yeah.
third.
So, but what's real and what's aspirational from the industries that have potential here? We have good power, we have good water.
I was just thinking maybe something around power and clean energy. Because, you know, we've got several different kinds of energy here. We have the steam energy with the cogent, thank you. We have the gas plant with PGE and Carty. We have UEC and their expansions. We have BPA lines. We have a lot of stuff happening, but I don't know how much money that really generates for the city in terms of like land and employees. But there's a lot of work right now in that field, in this region.
And I'm not gonna get all the terms right on this, but then there's a couple of interesting things and that I know has happened historically. The landfill is actually now generating power. 3 Mile is converting some of their waste product into energy, whether it be gas that they're inputting into a gas line or power that they're putting onto a power line. So we're seeing some of the waste products that in the region, but again, those jobs aren't in Boardman. The people who work at them might live in Boardman, but those jobs aren't in Boardman. They're on the farm, they're at the landfill.
Right, but that kind of symbiosis is
Yeah.
is really it's a big thing. So if there's some way to use a waste product from a manufacturing facility in Boardman or in our urban growth boundary, that is a big topic for us.
And then
Something we need to consider.
the emerging generator, and I don't understand this one, is the hydrogen piece. And I know the county just outside of the city Boardman has approved a hydrogen facility. I don't know where it's at in its development. I don't know if it's gonna actually get legs and happen. But I've recently talked with another company that is looking at that as another technology.
The county yesterday just had a huge presentation given to the county commission on atomic. Was it atomic?
No, there's been talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, and Umatilla County has already approved and is working on finding the right location. Get it started, and they asked the county, I didn't get to stay for the whole meeting, asked the county if they wanted to be in on it, if they wanted to take it to their constituents, if they wanted to sign on and say, yeah, we'd like to support it, like, I believe it was atomic energy. It was the big from the 80s, right? The atomic.
Yeah, nuclear energy.
Nuclear, thank you.
Well,
It is atomic energy.
and nuclear energy is not allowed in Oregon currently. Hopefully that.
Under certain criteria. No, I listened to his spiel. And they
I wish they would record their meetings and make.
They do.
They do,
They
you just have to
also-
request it.
They post them on YouTube yesterday's meeting's already posted.
Oh, sweet. So I did not hear what they decided to do. I didn't get to stay for it. But yes,
There's a
so
lot of
nuclear
things
energy,
in-
yeah,
in How they do that, they can do it much smaller.
Yeah, the micro stuff that's coming out of OSU is really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
but I think nuclear energy is the new clean energy.
When we look at the services growth, it's interesting to hear that Lawns Ground they've sold. Part of the issue with some of our communities in our area is, and I'll give you two different perspectives. Everybody talks about, the Pendleton downtown area and why that works. Well, they didn't have any buildable ground, so everything got built right here. I mean, you can walk anywhere to where you want to go in Pendleton, but everything else was, steeper than a cow's face. I mean, it was just, and so then anything above that is ag ground. Those guys weren't cutting loose of that ground. And so, then you look at Hermiston, Hermiston doesn't have a downtown vision because they were blessed with good flat buildable ground and everybody wanted their own on and off from 395. Well, it turns it into a zoo. I mean, 395 should be rerouted and come in off of 84 to 82. 395 shouldn't run through Hermiston any longer. That should be a no truck zone other than for support within the town because You can be sitting at a light in Hermiston now for 6 or 8 minutes, just waiting for the truck traffic to get through the lights while you're trying to get through down 395 to go 4 miles from one end of Hermiston to the other.
Don't do it on a Friday.
If you don't know.
Or
the
Sunday
surface
after
street-
church lets out.
If you don't know the surface streets, you're in trouble in Hermiston.
Yeah.
And so, we're really blessed with some good flat ground. But, I'm gonna use Wenatchee as an example, because I always look at Boardman as similar to maybe a smaller Wenatchee, right? Well, Wenatchee has some of their town on one side of the river and
Yeah.
some of their town on the other side of the river.
There's no forethought here.
And so that's a struggle of us, right? I mean, how do you have a cohesive community, a good downtown center? You got to pick your poison, and I don't care which one that is. However, we've already utilized a large portion of that ground on the north side because the Port District runs in there. And thank goodness they do, because Boardman really has been very blessed with a very successful
Robust.
and good futuristic vision from the port directors that we've had, without a doubt. I mean, the Port of Umatilla has all the same ground availability.
Accessibility.
And absolutely, and both of those men are brilliant. If you sat them down and had a conversation with the two directors that they've had, both men are brilliant. Both have absolutely 180-degree polar directions as to where they think they ought to be going. And that's okay, but when we're sitting in this meeting, and if we're gonna try and start investing in and spending real dollars, or asking people to spend really real dollars, we have to give them a true map of what that vision is. Because I'll give you, for instance, in 2019, I had a study done, it was right before the COVID nonsense, as to what it would take to maybe, either build another location, whatnot. It is cost prohibitive. The cost of construction, even at that point, to try and build something nicer, bigger, newer than what I'm operating out of right now, there would be zero profitability with regards to what that would take. Your monthly debt service just to be able to build the location, expand. And I mean, I was expanding by, 12.5% is all. To try and do that with, future bump out, well, all of those things, the reality is there's not enough dollars spent in my industry, in our community, to absorb that. And your bigger markets, I mean, Hermiston, Safeway does in a day what I do in a week. But if you're gonna turn around and try and ask somebody to drop, I mean, for me at that point, it was about $12 million to build. That was without sourcing the ground. That's real money. So these are all really great ideas. I love the movie theater idea. What would it cost to build a movie theater?
Right.
I don't know what that is.
I totally agree.
You know,
I completely
All
agree.
those things
I
are
just think
great.
If we're talking about what we'd love to have, what we're aspiring for,
No doubt about that at all. But the reality is that somebody has to buy into that and write a check. They better have 25 or 30% in the bank to be able to even get somebody to talk to them.
what haven't we touched on, Brendan? What types
Well-
of jobs do we need?
So. Yeah, it's interesting, this discussion, because what you're saying is that you have jobs available here. We certainly speak to communities where they say, where are the jobs? We need jobs. And you sort of have the opposite problem here, where you have a lot of jobs available in Boardman and through the port, in even the broader region. But without the housing and some of just the community services to support the workforce is really what I'm hearing. So,
So we have people who come from, like, well, you said Portland, but every single day they drive an hour or an hour and a half to get here from the Tri-Cities area.
yeah,
And Benton City, which is easily an hour and a half. Yeah, every single day, 2 ways.
Yep.
And for people like that, when you think about them as a worker here, they don't shop here. Because you shop in the place where you live.
You're
Because
not driving home with ice cream from here.
No. Or milk, honestly. And you're, as soon as you get to your town, you're gonna stop at the store, pick up what you need, and then go home. You're not getting into your shoes again and going back to town. So wherever it is you live, that's where you're getting all your services, resources, and supplies.
But again, they're coming here because the wage is better than the Washington wage. But the
Oh.
housing is better than the Boardman, because they can buy a bigger house,
For less
less
money.
money. And so it makes sense for them to drive that hour.
So, and the big opportunity for the housing is to get the same contractor who builds that house with those supplies, to build that same house here with those same supplies. But because they have to go 20 more miles down the road from Umatilla or Hermiston, one of the hiccups that they have is that those workers get a bump on their prevailing wage because they have to go further.
Yeah.
And they
The Oregon
get,
thing. Yeah, that's an Oregon thing.
and it is, but they get more money because they go 20 more miles.
So. And
And
that's,
the-
yeah,
And it costs the developer that much time, how many employees he has. And so a $200,000 house in the Tri-Cities sells for 3 or 3.5 here. The exact same square footage, exact same floor plan.
and a lot of the Washington construction guys won't,
The licensure here is.
yeah, it's a pain, so they like, forget it, it's not worth it to them.
Right.
They
The
got enough-
reciprocity is
Well,
not.
they have enough, so the other thing to note is that I think that the Tri-Cities is probably the single largest, fastest growing region in all of Washington state.
Right, and the difficulty there too is.
So they had plenty of work, is I guess what I'm ending on.
Yeah, and you go to the Tri-Cities and you do have all the shopping available and you do have 3 different theaters to pick from and you can go to a hockey game or a baseball game and you can
See,
Yeah.
Kiss.
You know, personally, I don't mind driving to go to that bigger venue because Portland's not gonna support that, but. You know, I don't disagree with what anybody's saying here, we do need, but it's a vicious cycle in my opinion.
Yep.
It's, I don't know how you guys are gonna combat it.
Well, this is a good, very good start.
Chicken.
Yeah.
This has been good discussion. I just noticed the time, so I want to make sure that anyone who does have a next meeting they need to get to knows that it's 11:30.
We'll do your next slide though, because there's a couple things on here that I just really quickly.
Yes.
Manufacturing, we have in food, in food processing. Tourism is here. We've got some really good tourism assets. We need to figure out how to maintain them and grow them. That's the Marina Park. It's the Sage Center. It's the waterfront.
But it would be nice to get more retail.
They've been doing it, they've been doing a very nice job out there.
Yeah. The golf course, the conversion of the golf
Yeah,
course.
they've done a very nice job.
All great stuff. Retail is a huge need.
Huge.
Transportation, warehousing and distribution. I think the port
We
fulfills
knocked
that.
that out of the park.
Yeah.
Is doing really well on that front. And we do have others that are coming in with smaller scale kind of flex buildings. We've been working on approving some of those through planning. Healthcare, we've got some, and there could be a real big change coming on that front.
Real.
And then data centers, well, Rodrigo's here today. We've got a few in the region, just a few data centers in the region.
I love them.
And, in Morrow County, that started right here in 2008. So, I think it's a good history and a good tradition. I know that it also though creates a lot of conflict in the region. But data center growth, you can love it or hate it, but I think we need to figure out how to embrace it.
Well, I also think that it needs to be, not vetted out, but. The community doesn't understand. They just think that, the data centers are coming in and taking all this stuff away from our community. And this is just my opinion, that they need to be better educated. So,
Well, and for a long time, AWS didn't want people to know who they were, where they were. That has shifted and you can drive around and you can see an awful lot of public benefit from what AWS has done.
I don't think we celebrate that well enough.
I don't think we do either. I think too many of us grew up in that AWS era when they didn't want people to know about them. So for me, it's like, yeah, it's that data center company, the one named by the river down there.
Rackspace?
Yeah.
That was their nickname.
But there are other data centers in the mix that are coming in as well. We're seeing that happen as well. So I think we've got to figure out how to embrace that industry in a way.
Well, I think that sometimes people, and, not to diminish anything, but people don't like the big concrete squares. Blocks. They would like to see something a little more attractive. I'm sure that's a great system for Amazon, but they would like to see something with a little more aesthetically pleasing. Pardon you?
At least from the freeway view, maybe put a mural on the side of it so it looks prettier. But what about a fulfillment center? We're talking about all of what the data center is now. What about a fulfillment center? Because the shift is to buy everything online because it's so much easier to hit a button and have it in your house in 2 or 3 days.
But you've already
And-
addressed that. We have 200 to 400 open jobs.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, they're
Right.
gonna drop a fulfillment center here when they're already competing for 200, 400 open jobs that are sitting here right now.
Well,
We have the transportation piece. I'm with you.
Mhm.
I mean,
We have
you
the
can get to any major city in the Pacific Northwest here in one direction in 5 hours.
Going back about.
We are in the middle of everything. Yeah.
One run truck in and out to any major city in the Pacific Northwest from right here.
And there's
Inside
a
of the
huge
truckers.
transfer station in
Yep.
Hermiston, right at the confluence of I-82 and I-84,
Yep.
so we.
So Ryan, you put your hand up.
I don't disagree with
Yeah.
somewhere in
You're
the
looking-
region would be nice though, because FedEx and UPS and all of them, they suck. They can't get anything to where it needs to go going, so.
Okay, but I'd like to hear what Brian has,
Yeah.
since he's not in a word.
Let's let Ryan jump in. Thanks. Sorry.
Hey, no problem. I just wanted to add a suggestion if you're making a list of potential target industries to consider supply chain, right? So the companies that are suppliers to industries that you've already got.
Yep.
AWS is a good example. I'm aware of a company that has sold AWS so many HVAC filters that they're going to build a new plant in the region to build and supply new air filters to AWS. So as you build relationships with industry and talk about, you know, who some of their major suppliers are, those could be good targets as well.
Absolutely agreed.
And symbiosis, anything that would involve symbiosis, so.
Sorry to.
That's
I
the,
guess.
that's okay, I
I
understand
need
too. I promised to be back at 11:15, so. It's that, Mark.
Carlo write you a note.
Excuse Brenda.
Now, who's my boss?
Right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we've talked about a lot and I think there are need more to talk about, but we
Absolutely.
can pick it up next time because we have gotten to the time we had allotted. I want to respect everyone's
I
time.
think we got through most of it.
We did do most. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Next time I want to get to vision, which is, so we've identified a lot of the issues we're facing, and what I'd like to get to is, okay, it's 20 years from now. How do you think Boardman has addressed these issues? But I think I'm gonna put that question to the whole group.
Yeah,
So we'll do that after.
okay.
I'll give you a for instance on that, like in my world right now. Parking is my number one deficit. So that's the greatest struggle that I have right now is having enough parking and we manage well. But till and supply issue wise, I could probably quadruple the volume that I'm doing. I can meet the needs of the community and the square footage that I have with the way that I have it structured with tills and employees and shift sets and supply, the inventory coming in. I don't have to worry about that with where I'm at. It's just, how do I get enough people to be able to land in and around and near me, be able to make that a viable, growth plan for what we're doing. When they first built that, they built it on 1.5 acres. Well, if I were to do it again, I'd probably want no less than 5 and I'd probably want 7.
Because you'd want to create the complex that also offered the ability for the laundromat and the clothing.
So I look at my neighbor next door that doesn't really do a lot with theirs, so it's like, okay, so future planning as I do, are they ever interested in? I could extend down, I could even, tell them, look, we'll build this thing in. And then we'll sublet you the space on the end, you'll be able to do what you're doing. And, the last time that their parking lot was striped, I paid to have their parking lot striped. Because mine looked good and theirs was rough, but then they let it turn to gravel. And I'm like, I'm not gonna pay them to go over there and paint on gravel. It lasted 6 weeks. So, I mean, it's just those little things that, you know, when I look at, you know, how do we do this? But I can show you, I mean, I keep track of the number of customers by a day and by week. And really, the number hasn't fluctuated drastically. I mean, in fact, last year we were actually down in the numbers of daily. You know, now our volume is good because, you know, we've done a lot of work to try and make sure that we're the primary, you know, grocery store for folks. And I think, you know, we worked really hard to meet that need. However, a lot of those construction folks were moving out of here. And so that number of daily pickup folks that we were getting isn't quite the same as what it was. And so, you know, once we've exhausted Driftwood, once we've exhausted the marina would really love to have people to come, you know, and visit vacation. So they don't really want to do long-term down there, but it would behoove them financially to do it. But then you just turn into a mobile home park. I mean, then you have a really beautiful thing that nobody gets to actually access and utilize. And so then you have Panel View, which you just went and visited. Trust me, he's thrilled to have that thing booked.
Oh,
And, you know, he's a smart guy. I mean, he's figured out how to,
Kent is making a pretty penny there.
he's figured out how to farm ground and farm government it probably is equally as good on both sides. I mean, he's a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's doing with that piece. But you know, that's where a lot of those folks have gone. Well, they're not turning and burning. They may be coming down here to work, but they're not doing anything here. They're gonna go back there, then they're gonna jump into Safeway, which is 2.5 miles away, rather than try and make sure that their ice cream stays good. But last year and the year before, they were able to get into Driftwood. They were able to get into, and so we're losing some of even that connection for some of the construction projects we're doing in the region. Because as soon as you put them between Boardman and Hermiston, they're going to drift Hermiston and stay there because the services are greater, the availability is greater. And so you're not pulling them across the Patterson Ferry line. When they get done, they're turning and burning and heading back to the east.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so if that gives you a vision for the last few years, you know, we got out of the nonsense, you know, which was 19, 20 and halfway through 21. But, you know, when that started to come back, a lot of those jobs, especially with AWS, they're building more on that end of the line. They're not building right here where they were building right here. All those guys build here, stay here. Now, as soon as you put that between the two of us, Boardman's in trouble. It's not a net benefit for us.
Okay.
And then if you are able to do the old depot grounds, we're in the same boat. We get the dregs. We're not gonna be a primary as soon as they quit squabbling over that ground that's out there.
Yeah, that's a good point on
I'm
that.
gonna roll. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
Super interesting conversation.
Yes.
Get rid of it.
We'll be in touch.
Okay,
You're the chat.
so this is all
Oh, thank you.
great discussion, and that's the kind of thing that I think we'll be getting into more next time when we start to talk about specific inventory. And we'll have.
Well, my past was not in grocery. My past was I spent 16 years as a commercial ag insurance agent in this region and multiple other states. And so I know a lot of those players. So when you were talking about Dan and I go, Earl's never selling you an inch. I mean, south there, I mean, that's his legacy. And I mean, if Earl doesn't put it in a trust, I would be shocked to where then it's never touchable. And he'll let his boys fight over it. I mean, he doesn't care.
Right.
I mean, Earl's got his and he earned it and he knows exactly where his name sits on the map. So you have some of those things.
Well,
Thank you guys.
we have
Yeah,
to
thank you.
discuss that in the next phase. Thank you.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Dawn, I think we'll end the meeting there. Thank you for sticking with us to the very end.
Yes, sorry I was off camera. I've been having some internet issues, but no, great conversation. And again, there is so much going on in Boardman. I'm in awe that you are able to even sleep, Carla. There's just so much going on.
I'm having fun.
All right,
And
well,
And will I see you tomorrow afternoon?
Tomorrow, it will actually be virtual. I'm like triple booked tomorrow afternoon, but I will virtual, so I will shoot Dave an email reminding him to send me a Zoom link if he could.
He did. He sent.
Oh, he
you-
did. Okay, we
he
got it.
Sent a Teams link like right after the last meeting, so it's in your, it's meeting with a T on the end though. He misspelled meeting.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, I think I did remember that actually, so. Okay.
Yeah.
You got a great team, Carla. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
Bye,
Don.
Matt. Bye, Brendan. Bye-bye.
Good to see you, man.
I see you.
What do I stop the recording? I always get lost in this thing.
Up top, see where's.
Oh, says recording. Stop recording. Are you sure you want to stop recording to, you know?
Yes, yeah, you want stuff.